Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This week we are talking about Gateshead, Quayside. You'll notice in the previous video I've not really mentioned this at all. This is a key part of the overall regeneration today, so it's important we sort of cover this. At the time of the Development Corporation, Gateshead Council was the only council on Tyneside whose area was actually excluded from the Development Corporation area. This was because Gateshead as a council were reluctant to lose the planning powers, which would have to be transferred to the Development Corporation. It was clear from Newcastle City Council that them giving their development control away led to certain issues and certain sort of problems down the line. Gateshead had also been trying to regenerate their side of the river since the late 1980s. This was to coincide with the development happening in Newcastle side by the Development Corporation. Gateshead's aims for the Quayside area was to encourage development for business purposes, and residential use wasn't really on the agenda. Much of the land on the Gateshead side of the river was contaminated from its previous uses, and most attempts by the private sector to regenerate this area had failed. The process of regeneration began with the Baltic. This was previously a grain store that had been brought up during the days of Development Corporation by a speculative buyer. This was a really difficult building to redevelop. This was due to existing as a two-storey building and not suitable really for any other use. The cost to demolish this site was actually more expensive than the site value. The first scheme proposed for this building was to turn this into a residential tower. However, residential development in this location, next to large amounts of derelict land with poor access, was not possible. The developer failed to bring the scheme to life. This was made worse by the property market crash of 1990–1991. The Baltic was eventually sold to Gateshead Council in 1992 for £100,000. The council had the idea of bringing this space into use as a gallery. However, it was a while before progress was made on this. Funding this proposed scheme was the real problem for the council. The sums needed to fund this was not readily available to a local government council, and they obviously needed an external source to bring this money in. In 1995, in partnership with Gateshead Council and English Partnerships, this was a national government's regeneration agency. The scheme was drawn up for the whole Quayside area. This saw a mixed-use scheme replace where the Sage now stands, and open space where the Sage is and the Baltic is. Or in the case of this scheme, it had been placed between the mixed-use scheme and the Baltic. There'd be a large landscaped open space. The site, which is designated in this scheme as landscaped open space, is now regarded as the most valuable development site on Tyneside and will be covered later in this video. So in this original scheme, as it currently stands, the Sage forms this, that's open space, and this is the Sage, and that's obviously the Tyne Bridge crossing. But in this scheme, Sage has been replaced by a new mixed-use scheme. And this vacant space would become a landscape area. So this report, which was produced by Gateshead Council and English Partnerships, has actually proved quite useful in obviously getting the central government to back the proposals for the Baltic in order to fund it. This will show the long process sort of needed for Gateshead Council to justify the actions they were willing to take. Therefore, in reality, to get the scheme to life, Gateshead Council had to lobby Whitehall, the Government Office for the North East, the European Union, the Arts Council, amongst others. This really shows how much effort, how much lobbying had to be done just to bring a single scheme to life. Obviously, the recent success at the time of the Angel of the North by Gateshead Council sort of showed they could deliver outstanding art schemes, which obviously helped with getting the funding they needed for this. The Baltic scheme Finalised scheme for the Baltic was designed by architects Ellis Williams. The cost was to be 22.5 million, with a further 22.5 million set aside for the running of the gallery. An excellent scheme was achieved in bringing this former dormant building back to life. The funding for the Baltic was provided by the National Lottery, who was providing funding for heritage, arts and cultural projects. However, from the actual acquisition from Gateshead Council to completion, the scheme actually took 10 years. This sort of shows the immense sort of scale a single scheme was taking through this system. Most of Newcastle's East Quayside was actually created by compulsory purchase orders. In order to complete large projects, it was easier for them to own all the land rather than buying them piecemeal size. However, Gateshead Council did not have the same level of resources and have the same level of money or power as the Development Corporation. Therefore, they actually need a different approach in order to get this done, as they don't have the funding to acquire the whole area in one go. They were only able to proceed on an individual scheme-by-scheme basis when they had enough financial backing to achieve these. They achieved an order in 1996 to enable them to purchase an individual site next to the Baltic, and this enabled them to bring the Baltic scheme to life. Other sites were also acquired, including a former roadworks of 2.5 hectares. This piecemeal approach was very different from these Quayside. The price of this land were the bottom of market prices, as no real private developer wanted these pieces of land, and they couldn't really see a use for them, as they were mainly poor quality industrial land with limited prospects. Next up is the Sage. A regional music centre was originally meant to go to the sort of regional capital of Newcastle, but Newcastle City Council actually refused to give financial support to this proposed new music centre. Gateshead Council then jumped on this chance and offered the site between the Baltic and the Tyne Bridge. As with developing its cultural activities with the Baltic, this will of course be complemented by a new music centre. The available lottery funds was a key ingredient for this. The Sage emerged in 1997 following an international architecture competition which was won by Forrester and Partners. It opened for business in 2004, costing around £70 million. The striking design of this is polarising in opinion, but it does provide a visual feature for the Quayside. The proposal for this new music centre also came with a proposal to build a new footbridge over the River Tyne. This new crossing across the Tyne was designed by Wilkinson and engineers Gifford and Partners. What they created was the world's first tilting bridge, allowing a 50-metre clearance in the centre. This bridge won the Royal Institute of British Architects Award, the Sterling Prize, in 2001. The bridge fulfills the sort of people attracted to the Quayside, which the festival shopping, one of the original schemes for the East Quayside on Newcastle side, originally wanted to draw. Many users of the Sage and Baltic today actually park at the Farrell scheme car park and walk across the Millennium Bridge to the Gateshead projects, and therefore sort of this excessive parking that was built for the Quayside offices has actually come into use now. On the space originally proposed as open space between the Baltic and the Sage in the original sort of Gateshead scheme, this later became car parking to also fill this demand for these two new cultural venues at Gateshead. Taylor Woodrow emerged as a winner of a competition to fill in a site next to the Baltic. They proposed a new cinema complex, bowling alley and restaurants and bars. However, again, issues of difficult access and potential lack of car parking meant the scheme did not attract sufficient enough market interest in order to proceed. After 2 years of failing to attract users for the commercial scheme, the proposal changed. As there's little demand for sort of commercial uses, the scheme was changed into a residential scheme. Developed by Byron Homes, this residential development was completed in 2002. It sort of should be noted through all of this, the success of Gateshead Council. It managed to achieve so many regeneration projects with such little funding. They managed to secure £150 million of public funds, well in excess of anything expected from sort of a medium-sized council like this, and able to develop a whole cultural and arts sector on its Quayside. This sort of gave them a national reputation as well as a council, whereas Gateshead would often be overlooked as sort of the sibling to Newcastle, providing venues for people that actually visit Norwich now and Gateshead really changed this. The next step in this sort of overall regeneration of the Quayside was the St Mary's Local Heritage Centre. This was a former church by the Tyne Bridge. It was converted into a local heritage centre that sort of displayed the history of Gateshead. This used to be the parish church of Gateshead, but was obviously converted into a cultural venue to add to the sort of cultural zone Gateshead were creating by the river. The next real development we need to talk about is Hilton Gateshead. So following on from the public sector regeneration schemes led by Gateshead Council, a £30 million Hilton hotel in Newcastle Gateshead. This would be a 254 room, 4-star hotel overlooking central Newcastle. The project was originally due to be completed in June 2003, but there were extensive delays with reportedly 1,400 faults in the building before extra work was undertaken to correct these. Further private investment into hotels in the area was also made on the Gateshead Quayside. This was with Jury's Inn creating their second hotel in the area with a riverfront hotel just behind the Baltic. After all this, we sort of fast forward to modern day events. Not much really changed on the Gateshead Quayside between around 2003 and, well, now really. The latest is a new mixed-use scheme is actually being built next to the High Level Bridge. This is on the Brett Wharf site. This was a former oil works. The oil works actually closed on the site in 2004 and has sat dormant since. This new development will contain 269 apartments spread across 2 buildings. This will contain apartments, obviously office space, gym, commercial land, as well as communal space. The apartments will be 1 and 2 bed apartments, therefore not really aiming at families. The development cost £41 million to complete. The site is currently under construction and the former Brett Oil site has been demolished this year in 2020. The next scheme is also next to High Level Bridge as well. This is new offices and a new old nightclub. As mentioned in the previous video, at one point the Quayside was actually the centre of Newcastle's nightlife. This has since reduced in popularity, with city centre actually taken back over as the main area for clubs. This left a number of vacant units on Gateshead to Quayside. One of these is the former Beja Beach Club. This is now being transformed into Pipwell Studio offices. This is done by local architects Ryder Architecture. The nightclub originally opened in 1999 and became a cult favourite. The site has lain vacant for more than a decade and will be transformed into a landmark office project and establish premium workplace accommodation on the Quayside. The next real development on Gateshead Quayside actually lies a bit further away from the Quayside. This is the Baltic Business Quarter. Just south of Gateshead Quayside lies the Baltic Business Quarter. This is a 10.6 acre site and forms a large area of vacant land in Gateshead. This is set to be a large office centre for Gateshead. With a number of buildings already constructed here, Gateshead College is also located on the site, and this sort of brings new users into it. A district energy centre is also located here, promoting sustainable development in this location. The latest development on the site was completed this year, and this is the Riga. This is a speculative office development done by Gateshead Council, sort of showing Gateshead is still trying to lead the regeneration in this area, and the private sector is not really taken off that much, especially in the Baltic Business Quarter.